When my next shift started, I was once again watching the cafeteria. It was empty, the lights dim. I saw no signs of the younger, long-haired prisoner I called Sam. I thought he might be dead after an apparent suicide attempt. The dim lights made it difficult for me to see, but I didn't get a sense things were amiss. At the far end of the cafeteria is what I thought of as the kitchen. I have yet to be able to see back there as the lights don't really brighten, even when the dining area lights do. I could tell there was movement in the back. What I presumed was the kitchen staff making the meals for the prisoners. The prisoners get their trays from the left side of the wall. Then they move to the dining area to eat. When they are done, they return their trays along the right side of the wall. Once, I saw two prisoners pass the seemingly lifeless body of another prisoner through the tray return. So maybe there's a morgue inside the kitchen? I don't know. This place is so weird. When I think I've got something figured out, something else bizarre happens and I'm back to scratching my head. The lights brighten, and soon after, a group of male prisoners entered the cafeteria. I watched the group, looking for familiar faces, like the troublemaker I called Kenny, or the sad sack I called Eugene. Even the three stooges who got into a fist fight the other day would have stuck out to me, but I didn't recognize any of them. That was until I saw the last prisoner queue up for his meal. He was looking at the floor, and he had cut his hair short, but it was Sam. I was sure of it. He got his food and went to a table, taking care to sit with his back facing me. They must have run out of actors and had to reuse a previous cast member. I was angry. No, I was fucking livid. This whole thing was some sort of experiment to see how much they can get me to push the button. I was their little guinea pig for some kind of sick mind game. If the pendulum inevitably swings in the opposite direction, I decided my previous pledge to not press the button would have to be met with an oversized flip-flop. I was going to give my finger carpal tunnel syndrome from the amount of presses I was about to do. I knew the meal service wouldn't last more than a few more minutes before the first prisoners finished eating and left the room, so I had to act fast. I scanned the room, looking for violations. One guy had his shirt slightly untucked, pressed the button. Another guy coughed without covering his mouth, pressed the button. One guy crossed his feet under the table, straight to the button. One guy smiled a bit when he took the last bite of his meal. Believe it or not, button. I must have hit it at least half a dozen times in 3 or 4 seconds. The screen went black for a few minutes. When the view resumed, the cafeteria was still fully occupied and nobody had moved from their seats, even though most of their trays were empty. The prisoners who I had been looking at when I pushed the button stood up and walked over toward the cage window on the right. They knelt down in front of it, their bodies sideways from my perspective, facing the window. From my angle, I could not see outside the window. I'm not sure what they were looking at, but they were completely transfixed by whatever was out there. The door on the left opened about halfway, and 2 claw hammers came sailing through the doorway. They hit the ground about 10 feet into the room and slid until they were almost hit the line of kneeling prisoners. More theatrics. Was I supposed to think there was going to be some bludgeoning of the prisoners over smiling or crossing their feet? I called bullshit and waited for the screen to go black again, probably to give the producers time to substitute fake corpses and spray fake blood. This place was getting predictable, and I was ready for the experiment to end. The screen went black, and a 20-minute countdown timer appeared. This wasn't right. My shift had barely started. Did I somehow lose track of time again? My phone started ringing, and when I turned toward the sound, Mitty jumped from the couch and sprinted out of the room. I guess he was still mad at me. I walked to the couch and looked at the phone, expecting an unlisted number. It was my dad. He sounded awful. I asked him if he was okay, and he told me he was sick. He said he wanted to go to his doctor, but there was no available appointments today. I was going to offer to drive him to the hospital in town, but I was cut off by my call waiting alert. Wouldn't you know it, An unlisted number. I told my dad I had to go, and I promised I would call him back soon. I switched over to the incoming call. I was happy to talk to the warden, determined to demand answers and solve the mystery of the absurdly theatrical experiment. What were the rules I was supposed to be enforcing? Are these real prisoners? If so, why all the secrecy? I had my fill, and I was going to turn all that energy against the warden. But it wasn't him. It was the human resources civilian, Miss Tucker. Miss Tucker told me that she had authorized a 20-minute break to allow me to prepare for my upcoming unscheduled overtime shift. I told her I was done playing these games, and her voice focused with a sharpness that could cut glass.
"You don't understand, Rook,"
she said.
"When the warden offers an overtime shift, you do not turn him down."
I was done. Fuck this job. Fuck this experiment. Fuck this cloak and dagger bullshit. I told her I quit. Miss Tucker didn't say anything for a few seconds. When she did speak, her words were cold.
"I think you would understand by now that abandoning your post without being properly relieved is a violation. You would do well to remember, it's better to watch the camera than to be watched by it."
The call disconnected. I decided to finish my first shift rotation to get the rest of the money, and then I was going to quit with $13,000 in cash and a story I could tell for years to come. I had better things to do than play prison guard. If I'm being honest, there was a part of me that was a little nervous at the idea of being selected to be a prisoner, despite my innocence and despite my belief that the whole premise was bullshit. The overtime shift was a sad little joke. I watched a group of women, none of whom I'd seen before. This one must have been a recording, since someone took the time to add digital effects to the video playback. One of the prisoners had a pixelated blob floating over her face, preventing me from seeing anything more than a blur. I bet they realized they forgot to have her sign the release for her likeness before they finished shooting the scene, and it was cheaper just to keep her in the recording and blurred out. I decided it was probably Mother Teresa, since the blurry prisoner was vaguely familiar, whose supposed corpse was fed into the tray returned. Nothing interesting happened. Eat, sleep, repeat. No theatrics, no tests, no button. The women left, a trustee cleaned, and the lights went dim for a few hours. The screen went black, and a countdown appeared to advise I had 7 minutes and 6 seconds until my next shift. Fuck. I guess the overtime meant I would have to pull 3 shifts together for 18 hours straight. I hoped that meant I would be able to get even more money out of this bullshit human behavior experiment. The only thing keeping me going was the money. I was surprised I wasn't falling asleep where I sat. There was no time to think about it, so I didn't. I jogged to the kitchen, filled the kettle, fed the kitty, and found my phone. I decided to bring it with me to my desk to record the screen. I wanted proof of, well, whatever I could record to document this insanity. I stopped in the bathroom, then returned to the kitchen to grab a mug and start the coffee. When I got back to my desk, I sat down and pressed the power button to start my next shift. When the screen lit up, the view had changed for the first time I could recall. I thought I was still viewing the cafeteria, but the camera had panned to the left and zoomed into the door. The door through which so many prisoners had passed was now in front of me. I waited for something to happen, somehow mesmerized by the sight of the door. I had completely forgotten about my phone. My focus was finally broken free by a housefly that landed on my screen. I absently waved my hand to shoo it away, and my finger grazed the screen. The view changed as the camera panned to the right. Oh, for fuck's sake. Did this mean I could control the camera the entire time? I couldn't believe my luck, or maybe my stupidity. After moving the camera, a small reticle appeared in the middle of the screen. I felt so stupid, so very, very stupid. I tested pinch to zoom. Yeah, that worked too. The warden was right. I was not the brightest bulb. I played with the camera for a few more minutes, trying to zoom into the area where the prisoners got their trays, hoping to see something useful. I zoomed out, looking over the entire cafeteria. It was spotless. I couldn't tell if this was still a frame or a live feed, or even a video playback. The lights brightened, and the door on the left opened. I decided to test out the reticle. I zoomed it in, focusing on the door, the reticle in the middle of the entryway. Once again, I went trigger-happy with the button. About a dozen prisoners made their way into the cafeteria, and this time there were several men and some women mixed together. I decided each one of them would get a button press. I didn't even bother trying to justify a violation. If this whole thing was some dumb game, then I wasn't worried about breaking it. After the last button press, the door shut. The first prisoner was at the front of the queue, waiting for his tray, but no trays were being pushed out from the kitchen. The prisoners didn't move for a few minutes. They stood and waited. I zoomed to their faces, hoping to recognize one of them, but I didn't remember any of them. There must have been some movement at the window, because the group turned to look at it. I wish I had audio to hear what was going on in the room. It looked like they started singing. That sounds a little silly, but I don't know how else to describe it. Their mouths opened, as if stretching out the words to fit some foreign melody. The prisoners walked towards the middle of the cafeteria, where there was an open column that separated rows of tables. They formed a sort of loose circle, although they stayed focused on the window, singing or chanting, or whatever they were doing. When the song stopped, the ones closest to the window turned inward, so they were all facing each other. Without a shred of modesty, they stripped naked. I didn't even think to press the button. This whole thing was so bizarre. The screen went black. While I was waiting for the video to resume, I finally remembered my phone. Well, I remembered it because I realized it was ringing. I looked down to see it was an unlisted number. I answered it, and I was surprised to find myself happy to hear the warden's voice. There's just something soothing about it, even when he's not being kind. This time, though, he was positively tickled.
I knew I saw something in you, kiddo. You've come so far in such a short time that I've decided to give you a promotion. Be a dear and go answer your door. Be sure to bring your workstation.
As soon as he said it, there was a knock on my door. Maybe it was the sleep deprivation, or maybe it was the way he talked, but I was moving without debate. When I got to the door, I opened it to find a delivery man with a cardboard box. The warden told me to take the box and hand over the computer. I did as he asked, then I shut the door and walked back to my desk.
You want to open it before I leave you,
he said.
As I understand it, you've been hoping for further instruction on your position.
I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife to cut the tape. I kept the phone to my ear, afraid to miss anything from this delightful man. I nestled the phone to my ear as I cut the tape and opened the box. My fingers pinched high on the blade to ensure I didn't accidentally overpenetrate and damage its contents. I had a feeling there would be a reward inside, since the warden was so pleased with my work. With the box opened, I found a new computer and 2 envelopes, each stuffed with cash.
A promotion means more than responsibility. You'll find your compensation has been increased to match your contributions to the team.
I can't believe I would have settled for $13,000 earlier. There must have been more than that in this one payment. I thanked him and asked about the further instruction he promised.
You've seen that it's important to identify which of our guests is in violation, and you've learned how to pick them out of the crowd. Perhaps soon you'll see the steps we take to impugn their indignancy. We are counting on you to light the path to their atonement. Well, look at the time. You'll never guess when your next shift starts.
I asked him if it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 minutes. He laughed, and I thought it was genuine.
Kid, you might just make it.
He disconnected the call. I felt elated. I opened the computer and was about to press the button when I stopped. I saw the power button and the punishment button, but this computer had a third button. There was a sticky note that said, "Do not press lightly." Beneath it was a small doodle. To start my next shift, you'll never guess what I did. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more or simply like to support my channel, please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps out. Until next time.